Hi, my name is Will Kennedy, and this week I'm joined by a recruiter called Simon. Simon is a fantastic person. He has worked in education recruitment pretty much all of his career. He now runs a smaller, more boutique recruitment agency, and he, in his conversation with me, talks about a number of things. We explore the NEU's paper on the impact of recruitment costs on schools. He talks about building solid relationships. He also explains how he went from being, somebody who didn't work in education and therefore didn't get into it the same way that you or I, or you and myself, and teachers would. That love for children to be successful, but yet he's learned to love the concept of children being successful, whether that is social, emotional, or academic. He then tells us a superpower. He does go a little bit red in the face, but we won't begrudge him of that, because we all sometimes have a bit of imposter syndrome. I really hope you enjoy this episode of Unassuming Heroes. Over to Simon. Hey Simon, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Noel, how are you?
I'm really, really good. I'm really thankful that you've come on the podcast, and I think that you might be a little bit of a controversial one because you work in recruitment. And
I do.
Before we get to your day-to-day stuff and impact on kids and your superpower, we were chatting just before, and I think I'm very keen to hear your take on the NEU's view of recruiters and agencies.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a difficult one, right? So I know that in my world, agencies can be seen as a necessary evil at time, and I totally understand that. And I think more so than ever at the moment, with schools struggling with their budgets as much as they are, it's a way of kind of, I suppose, imparting some blame somewhere. The report itself, I think, statistically, I don't believe it adds up to what I see in the day-to-day market at the moment. Some of the facts and figures around what schools are currently paying in terms of their charges and what kind of teachers and agencies need getting paid. And I think it's there to essentially what is already a fractious relationship potentially between teachers, schools, and agencies. It's kind of driving that further away. I think the issue we have at the moment is schools are really struggling with their budgets, right? And they're also struggling with recruitment and retention. So if you then have got teachers that feel that they're not being paid correctly for their supply, which is essentially a big part of that report, it's difficult in our world to then increase their pay rates, which is going to have a knock-on effect of increasing charge rates for schools that are already really struggling for budgets. So I definitely think there is a big reason for reform within supply and education and recruitment. And there's lots and lots to talk about at the moment, but I feel like that report is maybe making what is already a fractious relationship even more so. I really appreciate you having the time to have me on this, because what I really want to do is try to understand and build better relationships with education. That's a big part of what I'm trying to do with my new business. And I think the more open and honest conversations we can have, the more likely that will happen.
So your business is based in West Sussex, Surrey, South London, and I know you worked in North London before. So you've already got really good relationships with schools. So then you've got a report like that, and then you're kind of confused about why that report's like when you've already got these really strong relationships.
Yeah, I think if you take the report out of it, I think recruitment itself can have a bad name. And I think when you're dealing with public funds and outcomes for students and all these things that are so important, I think it's important that you get it right. And I think you're sometimes dealing with, depending on the agency and the person you're dealing with, you might be dealing with someone who's been in the job for a month. They might go on to be a fantastic education recruiter, potentially like myself, but they may not, they're not always going to have that drive and understanding of schools from the off. But I think what I would say to school leaders at the moment, with kind of how the market is, really understanding the people and the agencies and the recruiters you're working with and making sure that they have a deep understanding of your school is so important. And I think understanding that transparency, I think, is a really key word. So what are your agency charging you? What are they paying their candidates? And I think that is what the report essentially suggests. I think the highlight factor was on there, £150 an average pay rate for a teacher, and that the average charge rate was something like 268. Now, I know definitely from my last company, the role I was in, that isn't happening, or definitely not on a regular basis. But there is ways to find that out, speaking to your agencies. And I think if you have agencies where you have long-standing, deep relationships, that doesn't have to be one agency. That can be 2 to 3 that really get to know your school. And then you can go to them on a regular basis, and they can provide what you need, and they understand your culture and your ethos, and put things in place that you need as a school.
And I think that's really important, because I've been in education like nearly 20 years. Makes me feel really old. And the thing with it is that I know as well. I'm laughing. I'm going to like crow's feet on my eyes. The thing with it is that sometimes you have difficult relationships, and other times you have fantastic relationships, and that's not just true of schools and recruiters. That's true of everything in life. And like you just said, just go and talk to them is probably the best advice, because then both sides are getting a good deal. But ultimately, you've already said, using public funds to help kids, the kids will get the better deal.
Yeah. It's. I think it's so important. I think for me, relationships in this is the key word, right? It's really understanding: are you dealing with somebody that understands your school and is going to do their best to provide what they can for that school? And that doesn't have to be somebody who's been in the industry for 11 years. My recommendation to leaders at the moment, depending on your size of school, would be work with one maybe more boutique, smaller agency that probably will have slightly better rates, because they might be working on their own, maybe a bit like myself. But they're probably not going to have a turnaround of every single vacancy you have, and they might not be able to quickly turn something around for tomorrow, which is what schools often need, dependent on their need for that time, right? But a larger, bigger agency, but you can still make sure you can understand that the person you're dealing with at that agency or that company fits the values of what you need as a school.
Yeah. I want to move on, because I do want to keep these all quite short. I'm really interested in. I was going to ask you about your day-to-day stuff, but I'm not, because I'm not sure. We can do that another time. I'm really interested in this question. So you are working now in, and we'll say education. You're on an education podcast. You're working in education, but you didn't go into education within the recruitment.
Yeah.
Which therefore means, ethically or morally, lots of teachers, people in education go into it for the kids to do well, outcomes or progress, whichever, right?
Yeah.
How it's a bit of a weird position. You went into something, now you're doing it, and before you came on, you said that you want kids to do well. How's that sort of like grown over time?
So I think first and foremost, it's a key point to say my wife's a senior leader within a primary school. I've been a governor of a primary school, and I really understand the need for good recruitment and the purpose of what these people are doing in the first place. I didn't get into education recruitment, and when I first went in, I wasn't because I thought about the outcomes of the children. I'd be totally upfront and say that, but I've realised that you don't get good at this job without really understanding the purpose behind what you're doing. So for me, it wasn't always necessarily about, at first, the outcome for the children. It was the outcome for that senior leader for that school, and I would take the response from the person that I placed. So finding good people that really fitted into and thrived in the environments they were in, I would then get really good feedback, and I would continue that relationship, provide that again. And I think then going out and meeting and seeing the schools and building these relationships further, I could see the good that it was doing. And I think even more so now, my son's just started in reception. I know the importance of getting that right. And if you don't understand and believe that and get that right consistently, you won't continue to build relationships and work with the same schools, and you'll become very transactional. I think I've worked with a select group of schools probably for about 11 years. From when I first started up until now, I've consistently worked with the same people. And I think it's because I really understand and value what they're trying to do. And ultimately, that is to make sure that the children get fantastic outcomes and have a great experience at school.
So when you talk about, you know, kids getting a fantastic experience at school, and then you're sort of taking, you are taking responsibility for the people you place. If you place somebody that it doesn't work out, or you place somebody that is absolutely fantastic, what's your emotions after all that happens?
Well, look, we're not going to get it right every time. I think you have to understand that. Doesn't mean that the process you've gone through hasn't been correct. You ultimately want to get the best outcome every time. But you're dealing with people, and people's plans change. Not every environment is the right environment for that teacher, for that TA, for that support staff, and I think that's really important to understand. I think for me, like, I've spent the last little period speaking to people that I've worked with, like teachers and support staff that I've placed previously over the last 10 years, kind of talking about what I'm going to be doing. Some of them have gone on to do like unbelievable things, like moved into senior leadership, running their own schools now. And for me, like, that is such a great sense of achievement, you know, knowing what these people have done from when I first worked with them, maybe as an ECT or a graduate moving into a role. And I think that provides me with a real sense of like achievement. That's what I really value within it as well.
Right, Simon. So as you know, the podcast hopefully is just a quick insight into those people in education that aren't, you know, at the coal face in the classroom. And I'm therefore really keen. What educational superpower do you bring to, you know, the educational landscape?
Okay, I have to be really careful how I answer this, being a recruiter, but my imposter syndrome right now is kicking right in. I think, as mentioned, like, my wife has worked in senior leadership within primary schools, and I have worked with some like unbelievable senior leaders, schools, educators. So kind of comparing my superpower to them just doesn't kind of fit in with this. But what I feel I am really capable and able to do is understanding a crisis and taking control of that for a school. So that could be on a day-to-day basis or a long-term basis, really taking that responsibility. And, you know, I'm sure as a head teacher, there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, right? So my job as a recruiter should be able to give you comfort that if you need something, that I can go away, work on that, come back with a plan and a solution that fits. And not just kind of see what I have available and come back to you. Like, my job is to take that pressure off you so that you can, or, you know, that person can do what they need to do in school. And I think that's different. You know, it took me time to kind of get to that point whereby a leader would entrust me quite quickly with a quick phone call. This is the situation. Please go away and sort it out as best as you can. And for me to then come back with a solution that fits, and not stopping as much as I can until I get to that point.
I think crisis management is one hell of a superpower, and there's lots of people in education who could definitely take that as something that they should look into. Simon, is there anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
I suppose for me, like, I'm really keen to develop and grow relationships between agencies and schools, recruiters and schools, right? So I would love to, if anybody, any senior leaders out there want to have a conversation, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to ask you to give me all your vacancies. I want to understand the pain points of schools and make sure that what I'm doing provides solutions for that. So I'd love to open the conversation up to anybody who wants to talk about it. I'd be more than happy to have a chat.
All right, cool. Thank you, Simon. It's been wonderful to hear from you. And if this goes well, I'd like to get you back on at some point to go into more depth, because obviously this is all scratching the surface. But I am really interested in that wider world of education. Thank you very much.
No, pleasure. No, thanks for having me on.